Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Thriving Thursday, where I share a little tidbit that you can implement in your life right away that will help you live a life where you feel like you're thriving rather than going through life surviving or just maintaining the status quo. So, I'm going to talk about boundaries. So, I might do just a little bit of a series on boundaries because I talk about boundaries a lot. I'd never heard of them previously. And so the school that I go to is Dr. Townsend's School Institute. And I ask if they've heard of Dr. Townsend. He's the guy that wrote Boundaries. And so most people haven't, a lot of people surprisingly haven't heard of it. So Boundaries is a book that Dr. Townsend and Dr. Cloud wrote together, and then they have a whole series of them. Most of my books, a lot of my books are on Audible, but I have about these two. So Boundaries and Dating, Boundaries with Teens. I'm not dating. I just bought them. They were on sale, so I bought a whole stack of books. And so these are two of the ones that I have in paper copies, and then I have a bunch in digital, Audible format. But I wanted to talk about, number one, what is a boundary and why should you care? So boundary, which sounds like I'm putting up a boundary to protect myself and you can't cross it. And actually a boundary is like a property line. So this is my property. This is my house and my grass. And this is where my personal responsibility ends at the boundary line. And the neighbor's personal responsibility begins on the other side of that line. So it's more like a fence or a guideline. There's a lot of coming and going, right? Across an imaginary line. And so it's your job to set a precedent on where your responsibility ends and another's begins. And that's a twofold scenario. One is I don't want to give you responsibility and control of my life in an area where I need to take that responsibility myself. So there's that part. And then there's the other side of it where other people try to give you control and responsibility for things that should be their responsibility, or that are, I shouldn't use the word should, that are their responsibility. And so for me, I grew up in most of my life from childhood to adulthood, where the biggest challenge I think I felt is that not only did I not know how to express what my boundary was, how to say it correctly, but most importantly is that I've had people telling me I was doing it wrong. So when I said my boundary, when I expressed that this is either my responsibility or this is not my responsibility. So those are two ways to relay your boundary. Either this is my responsibility, not yours, or that is your responsibility, not mine. And so my growing up and my young to old adulthood life has been with people who have been telling me pretty aggressively at times that my expressing of my boundary is inaccurate. So I just want you to know that's going to happen. Once you start learning your boundaries and where they are and how to say that and how to express it to others, number one, they might disagree with you and tell you why they disagree with you. Number two, they're going to get kind of erratic because their whole world has been set up. If this is somebody that's part of your life on a regular basis. And it's not just your immediate family. It could be parents. It could be siblings. It could be your married people that come into your life through marriage. It could be work related. It could be boss. It could be your boss. And it just kind of depends on what their boundaries are, where they come, you know, what their history is and how they relate to you, and how does that connect to your boundaries and your history of boundaries through your life. So protecting those boundaries, accepting them. So the first thing, you want to know what they are. That's pretty difficult at times if you don't know what your boundaries are. I am responsible for getting myself up in the morning and going to school, being ready to leave for school. That's my responsibility. Okay. So if we think about parents and kids, and it can go both ways. You might have a scenario where, as a parent, well, my responsibility is to take care of my kids and make sure that they are good. So I'm going to go wake my child up. I'm not going to make them responsible for setting an alarm and learning how to get up in the morning, because I love my child. Okay, so I could be the problem in that situation. Or it could be the child demanding that you wake them up. I can't get up in the morning. I can't do it. I can't. So it could be the child not unwillingness to grow up and take responsibility for their own life. That's the problem. Or it could be a combination of both. So you kind of got, right? It's really hard to figure out. And that's a big challenge that I had, is because it's so messy. It's really messy. And everybody has their opinion, and everybody has their belief system that they've carried with them since childhood. And it's super, super messy. Okay. So just know what they are, recognize, have awareness of where your line is and their line is, right? And not to cross into each other's property over the boundary. Okay. So the more you take responsibility for somebody else's property, the more you have to accept that and continue to take charge of that, because that person won't take responsibility for their own property, and vice versa. So recognize it, understand and accept it, and then be willing to express that to other people in a nice way, calm, confident, loving way. Express that to the other person. And if there's a backlash, there's an uproar, if there's defensiveness or anger or whatever response you get, be secure knowing, right? Secure, like I'm secure in myself now. And it took years to know that no matter what your uproar is, it's not going to change the fact that this is the boundary line. And we're going to stick with that. Okay. So, take the time to look up Dr. Townsend and Dr. Cloud's book, Boundaries. And then I think there's maybe Beyond Boundaries. And then there's a whole bunch of boundaries. I think there's work one. Also, there's kids. I mean, just a whole slew of them. So look it up. If nothing else, you just reading the first one or listening to it will open your mind. You won't believe the places where people are crossing the lines for your boundaries and you're crossing the lines for their boundaries. So enjoy that. Go live your life of abundance. Have a wonderful week.